Here are some test-taking strategies to help you be more successful when taking a test. Do you feel stressed and that you're not completing tests as efficiently as you can? Well, here are some strategies to help you with that. Let's look at an example here. So this would be like a regular type standardized test for reading, or a question for that. So let's look at this and see what we could do to get the best answer we could. So one thing that you can do is to look at the question that you're being asked. And sometimes it's helpful to look at the question that you're being asked first so that you know what to look for. So here's our question. What can you infer about Marshall? So I know I kind of want to focus on the character Marshall when I'm reading this passage. Again, you don't want to just skim to look for the answers because when I'm inferring, I'm going to have to look at all of the text. So we're not looking at the question so that we can find the answer faster, but so we have something to look for when we're reading. So now let's read the passage. And as I'm reading, I'm going to underline key parts that I think are important details that I'm going to need to know. Terry had caught Marshall glancing at her from time to time. Well, I want to know these characters, so I'm going to underline Terry and Marshall, and that he was glancing at her from time to time. Sometimes he giggled when they passed each other in the hallway. Okay, so I'm going to underline this part here. Yesterday, when all of Terry's change fell out of her wallet in the lunch line, Marshall helped pick it up. So I'm going to underline that. Thank you, Marshall, Terry said. You're welcome, Terry, Marshall replied, blushing. I'm going to underline here that he was blushing. So notice I haven't underlined everything in the entire passage, just some key words. So I'm going to look back over those and kind of think about what I underlined. Terry and Marshall was glancing at her. He giggled when they passed. Marshall helped pick up her stuff and then was blushing. So now let's go back to the question. So what can you infer about Marshall? So I need to know what this word infer means. And something that you can do when you're looking at a question is that you can underline important words in the question so that you know what to focus on. So I'm going to change my pen here. So something I want to know is the question that I'm being asked. Because if it's a who question, a what, a when, a where, a why, I need to know what that question stem is. So I'm answering a what. So I'm looking for specific information, a what. I need to know what infer means. Now that kind of sounds like the word inference. And I know that when I inference, it's kind of like being a detective. I use clues and my prior knowledge to make a decision. I also am focusing on the character Marshall. So when you underline key words in the question, it makes the question more manageable, especially when you have those questions just seem to go on and on and on. So what, and I'm inferring about Marshall. And then I can look back at my details. I also want to look at all my options before I choose one. Well, what if one seems like it's the right answer? Well, oftentimes you're looking for the best answer, and you don't know what the best answer is if you don't look at all your options. So let's read all our options. Marshall has a crush on Terry. Marshall is planning to play a prank on Terry. Marshall left his lunch money on the bus. Marshall is trying to persuade Terry to vote for him in the class election. Okay, so now that I've read all my options, I'm going to take out ones that I know are definitely 100% not the answer because I have nothing in the text to help me with that. Okay, Marshall has a crush on Terry. Well, it never says that Marshall has a crush, but I'm inferring. So that means it's not going to be right in the passage. I have to use details of my prior knowledge. Well, he did glance at her. He giggled when he passed her. He blushed, helped her pick up her things. So that's a possibility. So I'm going to keep that one. Marshall is planning to play a prank on Terry. Well, if he's glancing at her, he's giggling, but then he helped pick her up. There's nothing in here that shows that he pulled a prank, so I'm going to cross that one out. Marshall left his lunch money on the bus. There is nothing about lunch money or a bus in this, so I know that's not the answer. Marshall is trying to persuade Terry to vote for him in the class election. Well, there's nothing really about an election in here, so I have nothing really to help. So the best answer is going to be A, because of all these details that I've seen here in the text. All right? So again, when you're answering a question like this, where you have a passage and then questions on that passage, let's go through those strategies again. Look at the question first so that you know what you're looking for. As you read, underline important parts of the passage, especially if it's a long passage. You might even want to summarize a couple paragraphs after you've read a longer passage. Then go back to the question, underline keywords, go through all your options, and then take out any options that you know are not the right answer. And make sure that you always go back to the text to check your answers, because sometimes you may have missed something and you want to go back to the text and just make sure that that's what you read. Here are a couple other test-taking tips. Before a test, get a good night's sleep so that you are rested and ready to go the next morning. Eat a healthy breakfast so that you have lots of energy during the test. Take your time. Don't feel like you have to rush through it. If you're not sure about an answer, you can always come back to it later. Don't stress about one answer that you don't know. Come back to it. Maybe that you'll know the answer later on if you have time to think about it. Check your answers if you're done. Sometimes we make careless errors, and if you go back and check your answers, especially with bubbling, you want to make sure that if you knew the answer was B, that you bubbled answer B, and that you're on the right number, and you haven't skipped over any. So check your answers to make sure that you've bubbled in the correct ones. And be confident in your skills. Think about what you've done to prepare for the test, and be positive and confident that you're going to do the best that you can on that test day.